people, and stay safe. This is VOA News via remote. I'm Liz Palka. Myanmar police arrested a famous actor wanted for supporting opposition to a February 1st coup. That's according to the actor's wife on Sunday. The arrest of Wu Ying came hours after two people were killed when police and soldiers fired to disperse protests in the second largest city of Mandalay. The violence in Mandalay on Saturday was the bloodiest day in more than 2 weeks of demonstrations in cities and towns across Myanmar, demanding an end to military rule. Protesters are also demanding the release from detention of elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi and others. The demonstrations and a civil disobedience campaign of strikes and disruptions show no sign of slowing down. Liu was one of 6 celebrities who the army said on Wednesday were wanted under an anti-incitement law for encouraging civil servants to join in the protests. The charges can carry a 2-year prison sentence. The head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog is meeting with Iranian officials in a bid to preserve his inspector's ability to monitor Tehran's atomic program. This even as authorities said Sunday they plan to cut off inspectors' surveillance cameras at those sites. Rafael Grossi's visit to Tehran comes as Iran tries to pressure Europe and the new Biden administration into returning to the 2015 nuclear deal that President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew America from in 2018. U.S. federal regulators are investigating what caused a catastrophic engine failure on a United Airlines plane that rained debris on the city of Denver, Colorado's suburbs. This is VOA News. The British government has a new coronavirus vaccination goal to give every adult in the country a first dose of the vaccine by July 31st. That's a month earlier than its previous target. The government has also set a goal for everyone over 50 or with an underlying health condition to get a vaccination by April 15th, rather than the previous target of May 1st. Health Secretary Matt Hancock said Sunday that the UK now has the supplies to speed up the vaccination campaign. More than 17.2 million people in Britain have been given the first of 2 doses of the vaccine. Britain has had more than 120,000 coronavirus deaths, the highest toll in Europe. Italians are marking 1 year since their country experienced its first known COVID-19 death. With church services and wreath-laying ceremonies on Sunday, residents paid tribute to the dead, including Italy's small northern towns that were so hard hit by the pandemic. Italy has seen 95,500 confirmed deaths from the virus. That's Europe's second highest pandemic toll after Britain. While the first wave of infections largely engulfed Lombardy and other northern Italian regions, a second surge, starting in the fall of 2020, has raced throughout the country. In the northeastern town of Vo, which registered Italy's first known coronavirus death on February 21st, 2020, officials unveiled a memorial plaque on Sunday. Tanzania's president is finally acknowledging that his country has a coronavirus problem. This after he claimed for months that the disease had been defeated by prayer. Populist President John Magufuli urged citizens of the East African country to take precautions and even wear face masks, but only locally made ones. Over the course of the pandemic, he has expressed wariness about foreign-made goods, including COVID-19 vaccines. The president's comments come days after the country of some 60 million people mourned the death of one of its highest-profile politicians, the vice president of the semi-autonomous island region of Zanzibar, whose political party had earlier said he had COVID-19. Election officials said Sunday that leftist economist Andrés Oroz will face conservative Guillermo Lasso in the upcoming second round of Ecuador's presidential election. It's a vote that's been marred by fraud allegations and taking place amid a worsening economic crisis. Via remote, I'm Liz Palka, VOA News.
welcome to Nightline Africa. We are coming to you from the English service of the Voice of America. Thanks for joining us. I'm Peter Clotte in Washington, D.C.
What we try to do in all of it is to say, all right, fine, yes, we recognize and we respect, the steps that you're taking, but we are saying if your natives, your nationals want to have the experience, Jamaica is the place to go, and we are ready for that.
The Jamaican government is working with the United States and Canada to help contain the coronavirus.
They have never provided masks to the population. To cite just these two examples, all problems cannot be solved by security measures alone. Let him lift these measures, and better yet, let him resign.
A Gabonese civil society leader says the death of two peaceful protesters in the hands of state security officers is unacceptable.
Not to divide Zambians, but to unite them. Zambians now understand that competence is unquestionable, integrity is unquestionable. I have been victimized, we have been victimized, we have been arrested several times, taken to court, never convicted because we have not committed crime.
And the Zambian main opposition party, UPND, demands transparent and credible elections. Those stories and more coming up on Nightline Africa. The Jamaican government is working closely with both the United States and Canada to help contain the coronavirus. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett says his administration has also implemented new measures to protect travelers from the disease when they arrive. He admits that the global coronavirus pandemic has harmed the country's once booming tourism industry. Mr. Bartlett adds that he is working with international partners to develop comprehensive tourism protocols. The goal is to ensure the health and safety of visitors while preserving, in his words, the country's heart and soul. His remarks come after the government reopened the country's borders for international travelers, including visitors from the U.S. This following movement restrictions imposed by the administration to limit the spread of the coronavirus. Analysts say countries that heavily rely on tourism, including Jamaica, have been adversely impacted by the disease. They also predict their economies will shrink until an effective vaccine is developed that eases the safety concerns of travelers. To learn more about government efforts to resolve the impact of the disease on Jamaica, I reached Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett in the capital, Kingston.
Well, it has had a devastating impact. It has literally reduced us from a level where we had 4.3 million visitors annually down to one point where it was actually zero. We have been building up slowly, but the levels of growth have been anemic, and the jobs that we lost some 130,000 jobs in the process, and they're coming back, but slowly. The recent action by both Canada, the US and the UK have had a really crippling effect on the recovery process, as we have seen a winter that is really a painful one for all of us. The economy has lost some 76 billion Jamaican dollars in terms of revenue flows into us for the year. So it has had a very, very devastating and deleterious effect on the economy and lives of our people.
Minister Bartlett, I'm sure you are aware that many countries are discouraging citizens from traveling abroad due to the pandemic. So what is your government doing, especially when you depend heavily on tourism, to attract people to come to Jamaica, particularly when a lot of people are concerned about getting infected?
Well, what we have done is to develop the capacity to manage the visitors who come to our destination, to ensure that the properties that they go to are all COVID compliant, and also to establish possible testing arrangements for them so we could know their state of health, and also possibilities for quarantining where necessary, or isolation, and medical facilities that will enable them to at least recover before they go back to their destination. So we have taken these steps and at the expense of the government to ensure that visitors who come to Jamaica are as COVID secure as is possible, but if something happens, there is medical and other logistical arrangements to take care of them.
Talk to me about Jamaica kHz, because last time we spoke, you talked about it. How is it functioning now? And for people who come to Jamaica, how will they feel or know?
Yeah. Well, in fairness, the explanation I gave a while ago is a big part of Jamaica Care. Because what it does is to provide for you a confidence level, an assurance that this destination is mindful of the health scenarios that are prevalent, and that we have taken steps to ensure that you, as a visitor coming to our destination, will be as safe and secure as possible. We feel very strongly that the future of tourism, at least the immediate future, is going to be predicated heavily on health logistics and the ability of destinations to indicate a level of confidence in the travel public that they will be safe and secure once they are in your space. And that's what Jamaica has been doing, and that's what Jamaica kHz is about.
Mr. Bartlett, is your government working with perhaps like the U.S. or Canadian government, since you have a lot of their travelers prior to the COVID coming to vacation in Jamaica, to work hand in hand about reducing any possible infection rate in the country?
Well, we've been working very closely. We pay a lot of attention to CDC and what CDC says. In fact, there's a CDC officer that is in Jamaica who we have regular and constant consultations with. The Canadian partners are here. We work with the embassy and the High Commission, and we try to make sure that we understand pretty much what is the prevailing conditions there and the steps that are being taken to manage their process, and for us also to comport as much as possible with those requirements. It is painful, I know, because some of our partners take very drastic steps, like closing their borders and literally shutting down on arrivals. But what we try to do in all of it is to say, all right, fine, yes, we recognize and we respect, the steps that you're taking, but we are saying if your natives, your nationals want to have the experience, Jamaica is the place to go, and we are ready for that.
Edmund Bartlett is the Jamaican Tourism Minister. He spoke with me from the capital, Kingston. In Gabon, a civil society group is calling on the government to resign. This following the shooting death of 2 people by the police for protesting Thursday. They are accused of violating lockdown measures imposed by the government to contain the spread of the coronavirus. But Laurie Zingdong, head of an organization called Let's Turn the Pace, says it appears the administration is using the lockdown to curb any dissent. She argues that the rate of infection and death due to the coronavirus are so low they make the lockdown unjustifiable. Rather, she adds, the government should intensify efforts to educate the public about globally accepted practices that help curb the illness, including social distancing, mask wearing, and frequent hand washing. Supporters of the government say the imposition of the lockdown is the reason why the infection rate is low. They are urging citizens to follow the measures to protect themselves and their families. They also condemn as unpatriotic what they say is the opposition's use of the pandemic to drive down the administration's popularity. Civil society leader Laurie Zingdong tells me that the shooting deaths of the 2 people are unacceptable.
The authorities in Gabon are using the COVID-19 pandemic to restrict freedoms. The COVID-19 test is required to travel within the country, to go to a restaurant, or even to enter a shop. A curfew has been instituted from 6 p.m. The number of places on transport has been reduced, and it takes much longer for people to get home. As the road network is poorly developed, huge traffic jams are created at the end of work, and those who are unlucky enough to be outside after 6 p.m. are violently assaulted by the forces of law and order. So, a watchword has been launched inviting the population to make noise by banking on ports and fans every evening from 8 p.m. to 5 p.m. just 5 minutes. As part of this action, young people went out into the street with their pots and pans. They didn't break anything. They just made noise. The police arrived and opened fire. 2 young people were killed last night.
But Lawrence, the curfew, the government says, was imposed to ensure that people are protected from the coronavirus. That is why the lockdown was imposed, to stop the spread of the disease. Why are people just not respecting it? Why do you blame the government for imposing it?
Since the beginning of the pandemic, government has recorded 75 deaths for a population of 2 million people. 13,000 people tested positive and nearly 1,000 active cases. Do these statistics justify a curfew? At the same time, small shops and businesses have been closed without compensation. The 6 p.m. curfew is causing more problems for many businesses, which we have to close. Not forgetting those that have already closed since the introduction of these measures last year. In fact, the population feels more mistreated than protected by the measures taken by this government. To escape the curfew, people are piling up along the roads, desperately waiting for a means of transport to get home. Far from protecting the population, these measures increase the precariousness, the cross conducive to the spread of the virus.
Opposition and civil society groups, including yours, are demanding an immediate investigation into the shooting death of these 2 young people. What has been the response of the government so far that you've heard about?
The spokesman for the ruling party made a statement today blaming the opposition for what happened last night. All protests are repressed in blood. There is never any investigation. The demonstrators are always guilty of having demonstrated. For this regime, demonstrating is a crime for which there is demand and enforced. That is why it's more than urgent that the Gabonese people get rid of this regime.
But Lawrence, isn't the opposition behind these protests to undermine the government? Because supporters of the government are saying the imposition of the lockdown is to protect the people.
The opposition is not behind this action. No one knows who gave the order. The information spread through social networks and the population followed. This government is never responsible for anything. I will remind you that it is not just the curfew that is being contested, but the whole set of measures. And as I told you, in the light of the COVID-19 statistics in Gabon, these measures are not justified at all.
So Lawrence, what do you think is the best way forward to contain the disease in Gabon?
What government must do is listen to the people, which it never does. The contested measures are not there to protect the people. In Gabon, the COVID-19 crisis amplified the failings of the regime. And it's not the 6 p.m. curfew or other restrictions on freedoms that will change that. Drinking water is a scarce commodity. They have never provided nicely to the population. To cite just these 2 examples. A health problem cannot be solved by security measures alone. Let him lift these measures, and better yet, let him resign.
Lawrence Ndong is the head of an organization called Let's Turn the Page in Gabon. She spoke with me from Paris, France.